All right, guys. In this video, I want to continue and actually finish the discussion of Chapter 1, the basics of nutrition. So this is the second lecture video in this series. We've been talking about the 10 kind of key nutrition concepts that are talked about in the chapter. I like to think of these almost like overarching type themes, I guess, for nutrition. And many of these themes we're going to be seeing kind of throughout the course in different chapters, one way or the other. And so we've already kind of talked about the first four nutrition concepts. Concept number 5, again, I got a couple of vocab words for you to kind of take note of. Concept number 5, for each nutrient, whether you're talking about carbohydrate, protein, lipid, vitamin, mineral, there is a range of safe intake. And so there's a couple of vocab words here for you, the physiological dose and a megadose. So physiological dose, as it sounds, it's a measurement or amount of a particular nutrient that basically is in the range that our body needs for that nutrient to operate, optimally, that everything's, is in a safe range. It provides all the functions for our body cells to have. And so it's right exactly in a range that our body requires. Sometimes you may see what's called a megadose. And so generally, the places that you see something like a megadose is in the areas of supplements or a vitamin or a mineral. If you're taking a vitamin supplement, sometimes you may take a megadose. It just greatly exceeds what has been recommended for that particular nutrient, for that particular vitamin or mineral. It could be a protein. Some individuals take a protein type supplement or amino acid supplements, and it could fall into the categories of megadose. Let me give you an example. Something that you may have seen a lot of times: vitamin C. That's readily available in citrus fruits, and has a lot of impact on our body. It is an antioxidant. It helps in our immune system. It helps prevent something called scurvy. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It's needed in collagen formation, a type of connective tissue for the body. So it's very important to have vitamin C. The recommended amount, so in other words, the physiological dose, and this kind of has an age bracket here. Most adults 19 years or older, seems to be about 90 milligrams of vitamin C. That's recommended for men, about 75 milligrams for women. You don't have to know those numbers for a test or anything. You just kind of use that as an example. But sometimes you may see vitamin C in supplements. This is a very common one. I just kind of looked this up. Emergent C. You may have seen that, in a drugstore somewhere or a grocery store somewhere. A lot of people take this because there's indication that vitamin C may help kind of boost our immune system. And so this is kind of a megadose. Our body only requires about, for men, about 90 milligrams, women about 75 milligrams. But here you have a supplement that's 1,000 milligrams. Now, that's not saying that it's at a toxic level. And in the next chapter, we'll look at some other limitations, like an upper limit of nutrients. So you can have too much of anything. But this is just saying that this would be a megadose. It's not needed necessarily for the basic physiology of the body. The recommended physiological dose would be 90 or maybe about 100 or so milligrams. But here you have about 10 times that amount. So that's a megadose. Concept number 6. Sounds kind of common sense, I guess. Food is the best source of nutrients and phytochemicals. In other words, we'll talk a little bit about different supplements, dietary supplements. There's a couple activities we'll kind of look at in the course. And we'll mention a couple things about supplements in this chapter, and there's another chapter that brings it up again. And we're talking about things like maybe a multivitamin or a protein supplement or other type of mineral supplement. There's nothing wrong with those. You always need to check with your primary care physician, wherever you get your medical health information from, of course, for you. But in general, dietary supplements shouldn't be considered to be substitutes for our food. And so in other words, we can get pretty much all of the nutrients and the helpful phytochemicals in our diet. Remember, we kind of try to get a variety of food substances to have a healthy diet. So generally, dietary supplements shouldn't be just a replacement for certain food items. Now, they play their role because sometimes we don't get all the fruits and vegetables that we're supposed to, according to myplate.gov. And so it may be times where we need a little extra vitamin C, or we need iron supplements in our diet, or calcium supplements, or vitamin D supplements, or whatever. So there are times when dietary supplements play an important role. We'll talk about some words eventually that kind of talk about things like the processing of foods, food processing. A lot of foods have to go through some kind of processing procedure, or kind of going through different processing techniques to prepare that particular food. And so a lot of times that will remove some of those important nutrients. And so for example, of the refinement process. So if you eat a lot of white bread or white rice, that those grains have been refined, and so that process loses some of the nutrients that are kind of in the grain portion, or the grain portion of that product. And so we'll kind of see that again. Concept number 7: there's no one-size-fits-all approach to planning a nutritionally adequate diet. Everybody's a little different. Your particular dietary needs are different than mine. Different age groups have particular needs, and so that's one of the things that we'll look at. What a newborn needs is completely different than, or very different than, what a middle-aged adult would need, or an older adult may need. And so different individuals, different age groups, they have different individuals with different chronic problems. They may have to have a specialized diet to meet their particular nutritional needs. So developing a diet plan, it takes a little effort. It takes some work to kind of find out what is specifically needed for a particular individual or group of individuals. And so we'll look at some tools, and some of the tools that we have in the software program that we're using, Connect, has a nutrition calculator process in there. And that's what, we'll go over the case studies a little bit as we go through. There's different case studies. So you may have an individual that's trying to follow a particular diet plan, or an individual that may have a particular chronic illness. And the case study kind of has you analyze their particular diet and answer some questions about that. So everyone's a little different. And so there is no one-size-fits-all approach to planning, the correct diet. Concept number 8: foods and the nutrients they contain are not cure-alls. And so nutrients in general, they're needed by the body. They're the life-sustaining chemicals I mentioned, but they don't really cure anything. In other words, they're not going to cure a disease or an ailment. If an individual has cardiovascular disease, or if the individual has diabetes, the nutrient's not going to cure it. Now, we've said that having the proper nutrition and exercise may prevent or inhibit certain types of chronic diseases, but nutrients by themselves are not going to fix a particular problem unless it's a nutrient deficiency. And so I mentioned, if you have a vitamin C deficiency and you had to be very malnourished to have something called scurvy, but you don't have enough vitamin C to go through the wound healing process and the collagen formation that the body needs. But if you were to take vitamin C supplements, and that would help to cure that particular deficiency. And so in general, nutrients are not medicines. They're just chemicals that our body needs to undergo the correct physiological development and routine that the cells need to go through. Number 9, a couple of vocab words here for you. Everybody's heard of malnutrition. Mal means bad, or not having the proper nutrition. A lot of times we think of overnutrition when we think, a lot of times we think of undernutrition when we think of malnutrition, not getting enough calories or not getting the proper nutrition, but you can also have overnutrition, having too many calories or too many excesses of energy or nutrients. And so that can lead to overweightness. It can eventually lead to obesity. It could lead to some of those chronic illnesses we've mentioned. But just kind of think about that. Malnourishment, now malnutrition doesn't necessarily have to be just undernutrition, and that's a serious problem. But it could also mean you're overnourished. You're getting too many nutrients, or you're getting too many of those energy dense, foods that we talked about in the last section. Last one is concept number 10, and it's just an observation, really. Nutrition is a dynamic science. Dynamic means it's changing. And so you may have even noticed this, some things that in nutrition that maybe you've heard of maybe 5-10 years ago may not be the same recommendation that there are today. And so there's a lot of current research that's out there looking at dietary needs among different populations, among different age groups. One of the things kind of comes to mind is, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, everybody was scared to eat eggs. Don't eat eggs because they're going to increase your cholesterol and increase your saturated fat and different things. And then, that kind of comes and goes. And it seems like about every decade, they kind of change it around. And now it's like, well, eggs really on their own really aren't that bad for you. They actually have a lot of good protein that's there. And so, it's a dynamic type of a science. There's new information, scientific information. That's kind of one of the things we'll talk about in the next chapter, is how do we know this information about nutrition? We'll even talk about things like the scientific process and, looking at experimentation, because there's a lot of scientific information out there. That's how nutritionists and dietitians have studied. Food scientists have studied and learned and are now learning new things to help provide us with the best possible recommendations that they can. All right, so those are the 10 concepts, key concepts for nutrition. The last couple sections I want to look at in the chapter, a couple of things kind of mentioned here. Again, we mentioned malnutrition. Undernutrition is definitely a problem. And so you can have long-term, anytime you see the word chronic, it's referring to some kind of long-term problem or long-term scenario. And so you can have chronic undernutrition, long-term deficit or insufficiency in the nutrients, the proper nutrition, the energy, nutrients that a person needs. What this kind of figure is trying to get us to think about are things that could lead to undernutrition. And we may not, in our particular society, may not have all of these problems or many of these problems, but places around the world certainly have problems. And this is not necessarily a complete list. You may can think of other things that could lead to undernutrition. But it could be farmland or a lack of farmland and natural resources to produce the amount of food that the population needs. It could be the lack of proper water supplies. Even here recently in North Carolina, there's been some concern about sanitary water conditions. What's in our water? Are we checking to find out what's in our water supply? If you're drinking the water out of the tap, of course, I'm here in Johnson County, and so are we drinking the water straight out of the tap? Are we, assuming that everything is sanitary that we're drinking, or do we have that tested from time to time? If you're living in a place that has a well and you get your water from a well, are you having that well water checked? Make sure that it's proper, has proper sanitation there, or are you checking your water that's again coming from a water treatment plant? It could be food distribution problems. Maybe the food is there, but it's hard to get out to a rural area. Maybe the road conditions, again, that may not apply to exactly where we're at, but places around the world may have food distribution problems. If you can't get access to those foods, for whatever reason, then you may be under the undernutrition category. Could be overpopulation, could be diseases, it could be war, and all kinds of civil unrest that's going on in different places. So it's just kind of something to consider and to think about. Make sure you know this term, food insecurity, and that's a real thing here in the U.S., in the state, in the county. Individuals or families that may not have enough resources, financial resources, to make sure that they have the adequate nutrition that they need. They may not have the resources to get the fresh fruits and vegetables. Maybe they want to have the proper diet and the healthy diet, but if you do the shopping in your house, you may realize that grocery store prices are very expensive. And so if you're, wanting to get fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy meats and different things, it takes a lot of money to kind of make sure that that happens. They estimate, now this is a few years old, 2019 estimates, about a little over 10% of all U.S. households fall into a category of food insecurity. The latest numbers I've seen was a little bit higher, about 11.5, 12% on average of households in the U.S. are in a food insecurity zone. And it sometimes depends on the population, sometimes depends on the age group. I hear about sometimes older adults that are struggling to decide, do they using their current resources, their money, to purchase food versus purchasing the medicines that they need. And so, that's a real concern, food insecurity. So, the last little section, couple of sections here, kind of gives you a few things to think about as far as, well, how do you find solutions to some of the problems with food shortages, food crises. One is area biotech. And so biotech is using living things, living plants, animals, microbes to try to increase their productivity, or manufacture new product, or make them even more nutritious. And so there's biotechnology that helps plants grow better in certain conditions, that actually adds nutrients back into the plant naturally. So that's one area, is to try to enrich and to use this technology to try to figure out ways to improve on farming, or improve on plant production, sustainable agriculture, farming methods that meet the demand for food without depleting the natural resources. Right. So trying to find ways to grow, more crops in a given area without having to take down more vegetation or more trees to create that farm area, or using pesticides that are a little safer for the environment, or using less fertilizers in the area and have more organic based foods in the area. So trying to come up with new solutions to have more food production in a safer and a sustainable type of a format. These are just a few other tips here. You can probably add to the list. Stop expanding agricultural activity, especially into tropical forests and grasslands. Find ways to increase crop yields on existing farms using resources like biotechnology, and rely more on non-chemical methods of pest management. Some of those are difficult to do. But there are ways to grow crops in a more sustainable way to try to, limit or at least decrease the amount of chemical fertilizers or chemical pesticides. Other suggestions, populations could eat less meat. They estimate about 40% of crops are grown just to feed farm animals. And so that's a big impact on the resources that we have access to. Trying to reduce food waste. Everybody can do that. Right? They estimate there again about 30% of food is just wasted. So if we can find ways to try to reduce some of that waste, that would go a long way to increasing sustainability and working towards having less problems with food security. Find ways to use natural resources and pesticides more efficiently. Last thing we're going to introduce that's mentioned here in the chapter is just a quick reference to dietary supplements. And so we'll see this again in several other chapters we look at and some of the activities that we do for the course. But dietary supplements, there's an act called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, 1994. What this means is that this allows the manufacturers of different dietary supplements to categorize their supplement, whether it's some type of protein supplement or vitamin supplement, mineral supplement, anything like this, as a food and not as a drug. So what that means is, even though there are guidelines and regulations, they don't have to go through the exact type of methodology to test and retest these types of supplements as a particular drug would. And so a dietary supplement, by definition, could be any product that contains a vitamin, a mineral, any of these nutrients we mentioned, even an herb or a plant product like a plant extract or maybe an herbal tea, something like that, amino acid, a protein powder, or any kind of dietary supplement that supplements the diet by increasing the total intake. And so just kind of make a note of that. Like I said, we're going to see dietary supplements talked about in other chapters, and we'll even do some type of discussion board type of assignment or something, kind of looking at benefits of dietary supplements, but also some issues or problems along those lines as well. All right, so I hope this was helpful to kind of go over these definitions and the concepts that we looked at in the lecture video. Make sure you're going through studying the bold words and all of the vocab words, and because, like I said, the exam will include questions kind of centered around a lot of the vocabulary that you see in the chapter, or mainly in the lecture videos. Thanks, guys, and have a great day.